But right now we're going to Lauren Southern, who of course has been a previous guest on the Alex Jones Show. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so last time you were on, we were talking about the slut walk fallout. Many of our viewers and listeners won't have realized what happened in the aftermath of that. Of course, you went to the Vancouver slut walk. You were confronted by these authoritarian feminists. They assaulted your cameraman. And then you had some trouble within the Libertarian Party of Canada, of which you're still running for as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Just clear up what happened in the aftermath of that whole incident.
Well, essentially, after I went to the slut walk and held up my "there is no rape culture in the West" sign, I had a bit of a hate campaign unleashed on me, as most people do after questioning or challenging radical feminism. And a lot of these feminists that did participate in the slut walk wrote a large slanderous letter about me that I was screaming over rape survivors and telling them the rapes didn't happen, which absolutely did not happen. And they started a campaign against me on change.org to try and get me kicked out of my party, as well as sent this letter that they wrote with just insane things in it. In fact, at the end, I believe one of the women in the letters said she was puking all night. She was triggered so hard by me being at the slut walk.
And they you watched the video and you're calmly stood at the back of the protest. You're not interfering. They come up to you. They try and interfere with your free speech, and yet you're condemned for screaming over rape victims. How does that work?
Yeah, no, it's... I couldn't tell you. It's the feminist mindset and logic. But they sent this letter to, they found my friends, they found my family, they found everyone in my party. They sent it to every member of the party, literally went through the party list. And obviously that caused somewhat of an uproar with people who were more on the libertarian left and consider themselves feminists. And within that, the reason that kind of started the party kind of questioning me and what I was doing with my videos and everything, or rather these few kind of left-wing libertarians questioning me. And what really got me kicked out of the party was me retweeting your video, "The Truth About Trans Everything," which kind of...
And this was just a satire video that I did a couple of months ago now. You merely retweeted it. Now, a lot of people on Twitter obviously say, you know, retweets don't mean endorsements. They took it as an endorsement. It was a satire video. It didn't even attack transgender people. It attacked the media narrative about how all, you know, Rachel Dolezal, all this kind of stuff, how this transgender issue is being hijacked to push these political talking points. You merely retweeted the video. And what happened after that?
Yeah, I made no comment on the retweet. I just retweeted it. I got a message from one of the higher-ups in the party saying, "This is completely unacceptable. I've had it. First the slut walk, now this. We've got to cut you." And I've kind of gotten a few messages about the slut walk since then of people saying, "We've got to get rid of her now. We've got to get rid of her now." But that one in particular, your video, was the breaking point. And I tried to explain, tried to defend myself, saying satire and comedy are one of the most important aspects of free speech, probably my favorite, to be honest. But we definitely need to defend the ability of satire and humor, and that just was not taken well. And because this individual was in a higher up position, I was cut, and it was without a lot of communication with other members of the party. So there were a lot of members of the party who would defend my free speech and did support me that weren't communicated with to kind of defend me in that. But it was a bit of an uphill battle getting back into the party.
How could they reconcile the fact that obviously libertarianism is about live and let live, and it's about free speech. It's about tolerance of all free speech, of all humor, of all satire. And yet they were so offended by this that they tried to ostracize you and kick you out. Were you actually kicked out of the party? That's what I want to clear up. Or did you leave?
I was half suspended. I was told that I was suspended, and I was taken off the candidates roster and taken down as a candidate completely on the list. And they attempted negotiations with me and told me if I kind of censored myself and made sure to do less videos on feminism and stuff, that I could come back. And I said no to that, obviously. And this is why I've done my video. A few of you, I believe you've watched it, on cultural libertarianism.
Yeah.
And the difference between believing in free speech in spirit and only believing in free speech on paper. Because some libertarians believe that free speech can only be restricted by the state, that the state is the only factor we should oppose threatening our free speech or restricting our free speech. I disagree with that. I think that organizations and groups of people can also try to restrict free speech. And although we shouldn't use government force or any kind of force to prevent them from doing that, we should adamantly oppose them in culture, and we should adamantly speak out against them trying to silence others. And a lot of left-leaning libertarians are not cultural libertarians. They seem to have this notion that if a culture decides an idea is unacceptable, it's okay for people to try and censor it. It's okay for people to try and stamp them out and not let them have a voice in media or in parties or anything, as long as it's not the state doing it. I disagree with that notion. I think we should try and defend free speech, especially as libertarians we should defend libertarian values in culture and try to reduce government at the same time.
And this idea that suppression of free speech can only come from the state is obviously contradicted by this phenomenon in recent years of Twitter outrage mobs who have within them more power than the state in many aspects to publicly shame people for, in many cases, benign comments that are, described as racist or offensive or homophobic. So the power is invested in those groups, in those mob outrage groups. Their influence is declining, which we can go on to talk about. So it's this idea that oppression of free speech no longer comes from the state when you have a social media, when you have the ability for people to create their own platform and network and link in with all these other groups on the left in the form of Twitter outrage mobs, which we've seen just over the past. I mean, there are examples every single week. But for example, the past couple of weeks, we've had this thing about the lawyer who dared to compliment a woman on her appearance on a LinkedIn profile. He said her picture was, quote, stunning. And yes, that may be inappropriate for LinkedIn, but increasingly LinkedIn is becoming more like Facebook. It's not just for business, it's for people to communicate and have conversations. He was completely castigated by the mainstream media. There was a backlash, which relates to the point I made before, that this kind of influence is declining. But then I made a video about this. A top feminist came out and said, let's put all men in camps and allow women to check them out like library books. Okay, imagine if a prominent man in journalism had said that same thing. He would basically be fired immediately.
Yeah.
And, but he said, oh, your picture's stunning. He was castigated. This top feminist who has written 160 articles for The Guardian, she was left alone. It's not even a controversy.
Well, if you have the wrong ideas and opinions, you've got to lose your job. You have to be shamed publicly. You have to be attacked by all media sources and be denied any way to defend yourself. That's the process and how it goes. And it's amazing that some people think that these groups, it's okay to leave these groups be because they aren't the state, because these are authoritarian groups by nature. And even if we reduce the state, these groups would want to increase it or get into government positions as it is. And you already see that happening. You already see Hillary Clinton pandering to feminists. You already see feminists here in Canada managing to get Gregory Allen Elliott in a 3-year trial to try and send him to jail for disagreeing with them. So they're already having an effect on government, despite the fact that they're non-government groups, because they are authoritarian in nature, and they will be the ones that will promote and try to increase government. And we need to oppose that ideology as well.
And let's just touch on that. The guy who was jailed for disagreeing with feminists on Twitter, that's literally what happened if you look into the background of this case. They claimed he was harassing them and stalking them. No evidence for that whatsoever. The only evidence is that he was disagreed with them at first, even though he was supportive of them in general, disagreed with them with the minutiae of some details on some issues on Twitter. And then he winds up in jail. I think, from what I remember, his son was trying to get support, media attention for that. What's the latest on that case?
Well, the thing that he actually disagreed with them on is they wanted to launch a hate campaign against a gentleman who published a game where you could punch Anita Sarkeesian in the face. And he told them, Gregory Allen Elliott, these feminists that are trying to sue him, what he did is abhorrent. The game he made, I don't appreciate it. I don't think we should be making violent games. But launching a hate campaign to try and ruin this young man's life and harass him online is not the appropriate response. And he continually tried to expose these women for trying to do this and having meetings to try and ruin this young man's life. And that is the reason this trial is happening, because he got a negative relationship with these feminists because he disagreed with them trying to ruin a young man's life for creating a game they disagreed with.
This guy is not like an MRA activist. He was supportive of them at the start. He was saying, maybe this is not the best tactic to promote feminism, publicly shaming the guy for making a video game.
Mm-hmm. And these three women that came out against him, they seem to have a history of plotting against people. There was a meeting held before the trial, supposedly, where these women and a few other people met up and plotted how to destroy Gregory Allen Elliott's life. And this was found out in a letter to the Crown that these women had met. And I believe that they confirmed that they did have a meeting in the case. I'd have to go and check back again. But this is something, it is a very odd case. And if you look into the details, I would encourage people to go and read the actual transcripts and everything on the case, because it is a fascinating case, or go watch my video where I interview Gregory Allen Elliott's son, Clayton Elliott. And there is so much more to this case that's going on. In fact, I believe right now they could not get Gregory Allen Elliott. They're having a lot of trouble sentencing him or getting any progression on having him charged for intentional harassment. And it may be that in October they actually change what they are charging him for, despite the fact that they have been charging him for intentional harassment for the past 3 years or however long the case has been going on, and changing it to unintentional or unknown harassment, just so that they can make sure this goes through. And I honestly believe that they want this to happen. They really want Gregory Allen Elliott to be charged so that they can set a precedent for online censorship, so that we can have a whole new funded police unit for online censorship. Because if you set that precedent, they can go and find people online on Twitter who are supposedly harassing people and put them in jail for it.
Exactly. And we've got, over in Germany, we've got the ex-Stasi official now working with the German government and Facebook to censor, quote, xenophobic comments, anti-migrant comments, as Germany experiences this influx of potentially millions of refugees. That is the precedent that could be set in Germany and in Canada, where it becomes a crime to disagree with mass immigration, with feminism, with any other of these left-wing issues. And this strikes at the heart of the point that I try to make over and over again. Whenever I make a video about feminists, radical feminists, and the crazy, insane stuff that they say and call for, the stock response is, this is just an idiot. Why don't you just ignore them? They have no power. They have no influence. But this case in Canada and others proves that radical feminism is a direct threat to free speech, not only on the internet, but in public, as was shown by your video. You were confronted by them. So how do we communicate the fact that radical feminism at the educational level and at the media level represents, and at the legal level even, represents a direct threat to the free speech, not only of Canadians, but Americans too?
Well, I think that journalists like yourself and Christy Blatchford and everyone that has been reporting on this, people like Sargon of Akkad, and have been defending free speech and exposing what radical feminism is and what's behind it, this cultural Marxist ideology, this is starting to get the ball rolling on a movement against it. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of mainstream society right now doesn't understand the gravity of free speech and how important it is, and that it needs to be defended. So many people take it for granted. I was just scrolling through Facebook and looking at comments from on a post on Facebook just from old high school friends, and someone got a mean message online, and I was shocked to see some of the comments on there saying this should be illegal. Why don't we have a unit banning this yet? And when I go out and I talk to people that don't have the same viewpoints as me, it's amazing how little value free speech has anymore in our society, and it's because it's not defended in the school system. Free speech isn't held up high in elementary school, high school, university, and unfortunately we are going to have to work outside of the education system and hopefully get people inside schools. And if you are in university right now, start a club. There are a lot of clubs in Canada starting up by friends and myself, Canadian Advocates for Freedom and Liberty. And honestly, we're just going to have to work as the rebels from the outside and try to get inside to educational institutions and start clubs and create a voice and get more people in this movement, because yeah, we are swimming against the tide right now, but I think we'll make it there.
And on that subject, and let's touch on this before we go to a break in about 5 minutes or so, you started a gender studies course at your college right now.
Yeah.
This seems to have flown under the radar to some extent at the actual educational, the university that you're going to. Tell your audience what you hope to achieve by partaking in a gender studies course, which of course will be taught by feminists, and most of the class will be made up of feminists, I imagine. So what do you hope to achieve by taking this course?
Oh man. Well, so many people right now are sending me content from classes, just little snippets of what they're seeing in their classrooms. And it is insanely radical stuff. And I've experienced it as well in classrooms where students are just nodding the entire time because they don't want to get bad grades and will regurgitate what their professors say. And it'll be just crazy radical things. I've had a professor say in a class that calling someone a mean name or disagreeing with them is the exact same thing as killing a million Jews. I'm not kidding. That is what a professor said, and that hate speech should be made illegal. And
they say hate speech is disagreeing with a protected class that they designate, right?
Yeah, and that wasn't even a feminist class. That was just an English course, right? So, and when you get into these more sociological courses, when you get to gender studies and women's studies, so far I've already noticed that it is more radical. You're dealing with a more deeper radicalism that is based off of a radical intellectualism. And I hope to kind of expose what's going on. And even though I'm saying that out loud and everything, even if the curriculum isn't quite going to change, the textbook isn't going to change, and the feminists in the classroom aren't going to be any less silent. So I'm still going to get a lot out of it, I hope, even though I've been very public about my joining the class. And
do you think they're aware of the fact that you've made these anti-radical feminism videos?
Actually, we just had to do introduction posts in the class, and unfortunately I had to post under my real name, or the name I registered under, which was Lauren. So the next post, you had to write down what your major was, why you took the course, and who your favorite feminist was. And one of the girls who posted after me posted that her favorite feminist was Jenna Christian, a blogger, and I went to her blog, and this blogger has 6 blog posts, and 4 of them are about me. So I'm a little afraid to go to class with that. I'm not actually afraid, but it'll be interesting. They do know who I am. I'm fairly certain of that. A lot of people on campus do know who I am. It was actually
so you're basically trying to, I wouldn't say subvert it, but you're just trying to pick up more information and knowledge about the process of how these courses are taught and the content of these courses and how it relates to the fact that this is a major issue, that young women are being taught this stuff at the college level. Now, in your video that you put out the other day, you made the point that the vast majority of these participants in this gender studies course, who of course are women, the vast majority, aren't taking a business major, they're not taking a science major, they're not doing engineering. So it again illustrates that the very same people who complain about women not excelling in STEM subjects, because of the evil patriarchy that oppresses them, aren't taking those STEM subjects in the first place, right?
And I guarantee, I was not surprised to see that at all, that the majority of the class were in English degree, social work degree, I can't remember the other one, child education. Those were the top 3, I believe. It was no surprise to me, because that is usually what happens. The majority of women go into these social degrees instead of actually STEM fields, despite the fact that women are hired 2-to-1 in STEM fields and highly encouraged to go into these. And I guarantee if other people took classes and got that information from their gender studies courses, even though I had a small sample size, I believe that would be replicated in many other gender studies courses across Canada. One of the other things I found interesting was when people were stating why they took the course, there were a few people that stated they took the course because of social justice courses that they had taken in high school. And I remember having a social justice course in my high school. It wasn't quite mandatory yet, but I'm starting to see it pop more and more up in conversation in university of people who took social justice courses in high school. So they're kind of being prepped in high school with mandatory social justice courses to go in and take more radical courses such as gender studies, women's studies in university, being encouraged. So this narrative is being pushed at every level from high school. When you go into university with that social justice experience, straight to your women's studies without ever having your ideas challenged. And that's the biggest problem. You have these students that go through high school with the same narrative being portrayed to them, and then they go through university without having that ever challenged, because 90% of professors are very, very left-wing.
Okay, we're going to go to a break now. We're going to come back and talk about the rise of the cultural libertarians with Lauren Southern. This was a major article in Breitbart that kind of got to the point of how the backlash against this Twitter mob outrage is being led by not just conservatives, but also old-fashioned classical liberals and, of course, new wave libertarians like Lauren Southern herself. We're talking to Lauren Southern, who basically came from nothing. She's a young girl studying at a college in Vancouver to be at this libertarian internet sensation. She got about, well, upwards of 1 million views on her slut walk video where she went and confronted feminists at a recent event. She then got another viral video on her own channel. And we're talking about cultural libertarianism. I want to get into that. Lauren, there was this major Breitbart article recently which you were featured in, The Rise of the Cultural Libertarians. For the audience, just define cultural libertarianism and why it has become so popular over the past couple of years.
Well, you've got, obviously, most people know what cultural Marxism is, and it's that kind of suppression of free speech, the belief in identity politics and classism, collectivism. And then you've got cultural libertarianism, which embraces, it's a challenging of the rising, very left-wing authoritarian culture. It is a pushback that believes in free expression for everyone, resisting this identity politics and public shaming. And I'm reading right from Alan Bokhari's article on Breitbart because he really sums it up fantastic. They want to defend humor, they want to defend personal freedoms and just everyone's expression, and end this culture that is more focused on emotions and being triggered and safe spaces, and instead embrace a culture that understands we are going to have to live among diverse viewpoints. We are going to have to embrace free speech and free ideas that we may find offensive, because free speech and free ideas are what has caused society to progress. There were a lot of things that have been deemed offensive in the past, and in an Oxford Union speech, I believe it was the editor Brendan O'Neill of Spiked magazine, where he goes and he lists a ton of different events that people found extremely offensive. People advocating for the Bible being translated into different languages, people advocating for atheism being allowed to be talked about on campus, advocating for gay marriage and just different freedoms. And these were all things that have been found offensive in the past. And if we embraced this culture, this SJW culture of silencing any idea that disagrees with us, we would not be able to make these same intellectual leaps we have made today. And I believe there is so much more we can achieve intellectually, so much more we can achieve in our society, in our politics, and in our learning institutions. But that is being suppressed by safe spaces. That is being shut down, and free conversation, free speech on campuses, expression, these are all things that are being shut down by those who are not cultural libertarians. So cultural libertarians are a pushback to that. They want a free society to have free thought and free intellectualism of any kind.
And that's the point, really. If you truly embrace free speech in its purest form, which is the only form in which it can exist on an authentic level, you have to take in everything. You have to allow for people to be offended. You have to allow for their feelings to be hurt. You even have to allow for, white supremacists to broadcast their views. So long as it's not, fighting words. Tolerance does not mean that you embrace everything that everybody says. It means you tolerate what they say and you're free to debate them on an equal platform. That is the true nature of free speech. But these control freaks, these SJWs, and we can define that term later, they're interested in authoritarianism because they are afraid of debating on an equal platform. And we see this on Twitter. Even if you've not even interacted with an SJW and prominent feminists, prominent, quote, left-wingers, in many cases you find that they will block you on Twitter simply not to come into contact with views that contradict their position. Now, if learning is about finding out views that contradict your position and adjusting your own argument, tailoring your own argument to address those issues, to address those criticisms, then obviously you want to hear all sides. But these SJWs, they're so insistent that they're right. Their ignorance is so virulent that they will block you before you've even interacted with them on Twitter. And in many cases, before you even know who they are, you find yourself blocked. If they appear in a news story, you say, well, I'll check out this person to see what they've been saying. Oh, I'm blocked, even though I didn't know who they were and I've never interacted with them, which goes to the heart of how they're completely intolerant of having their views challenged. And in many cases, they will go to the lengths of trying to change the law to avoid having to have their views challenged. So when it comes to those who would restrict free speech, in the name of protecting people from being offended, is it not our duty as actual proponents of free speech to be deliberately more offensive just to push that envelope?
Absolutely. I certainly think, and it really makes me want to do those campaigns where people bring whiteboards onto campus and just say free speech board. And people will write super offensive things on them, and campuses have been shutting them down all over the place because of this offense, but people don't quite get
Isn't that racist, though, using a whiteboard?
Of course. It's really fascinating because I've encountered these people in real life and tried to explain to them the importance of free speech. I did a video on my campus women's group and on safe spaces, and I had a meeting with the women's group on campus that were trying to kick me out and tried to explain to them what the importance was of having different viewpoints and ideas and having your ideas challenged. And it was just such a foreign concept. I suggested the idea that what if someone posts in your group that you should put funding requests towards Coney 2012? It would be great if someone came into the group and said, hey, actually this is a scam, it's a fraud. And the response I got from the group was that, how dare you? Coney 2012 wasn't a scam. It wasn't a fraud. It's real. And I'm like, you completely missed the point. Can't you just look at the hypothetical situation? But I literally
When was this?
Explain.
3 years ago, or was this recently?
Oh, this was like a month or two ago when I was kicked out of my women's group. Yeah.
They don't know that Coney 2012 was a fraud as of a month ago. I mean,
and they didn't even understand
how
the example
ignorant do you need to be? The guy behind it had a complete naked meltdown on the streets of San Diego or wherever it was. How can you not know that that whole thing was a fraud?
I'm getting to the point where I don't want to give up on arguing and debating and trying to change these people's views, but I almost have to just find it funny now to not go crazy.
No, I mean, yeah, this is the point. Even if you mention the word libertarianism, or say that you're a libertarian in the United Kingdom, people don't have a frame of reference They don't even know what a libertarian is. If it's not, parroting the left-wing social justice warrior orthodoxy, they immediately assume that you're a right-wing zealot, you're a right-wing xenophobe, you're a right-wing racist. So tell us about the state of libertarianism in Canada, and especially amongst young people. Try and give us some hope that people are at least aware of what it means in the first place.
Well, we are making progress, so we'll start with a little hope. But the thing is, in Canada, the entire political spectrum of Canada is shifting towards the left-wing authoritarianism, or just authoritarianism in general. The conservatives here in Canada are like the Democrats in the States. Everything's going more and more left-wing. But the idea of libertarianism is starting to gain traction. We have more candidates in the Libertarian Party of Canada than ever before. We've got 85 candidates right now, possibly more. Those are just ones on the website. And the idea of what libertarianism is starting to be taught in classrooms. Even if it's taught negatively, people are starting to know what it is and are no longer telling me, so what, I don't care if you're a librarian. And actually, I've just been given an opportunity to go and speak at an elementary school about what libertarianism is. So that's a pretty amazing opportunity for me, since I'll actually be able to maybe reduce some of the indoctrination they've gotten in a less biased manner than a lot of speakers, of course, and speaking from my own opinion, not at them. But there is some traction going on with the party. Tim Moen, the leader of the party, has a fairly popular meme and has been on a few news channels. We're trying to get him into debates in Canada. But I will say the one thing that I can find the most hopeful for both Canada and America is people are getting tired. They're getting sick and tired of professional career politicians. They don't want to see it anymore. And that's why Trump is so successful, as has been repeated time and time again in the States, is because people are tired of career politicians. And I think that frustration is really going to be an opening for libertarianism and people who are for less government to kind of change people's views on the current options we have. Because right now it's, are you voting left wing or right wing? Are you voting Democrat, conservative, liberal, NDP, conservative? And because people are so tired, it kind of gives them, people are more open to different options. So I really do hope that we can take this opportunity, cultural libertarians in Canada in general, and in the States, to push libertarianism right now. And it's a growing movement, and I don't expect it to happen like that, but I will continue pushing the idea of smaller government and more personal freedom for as long as I can.
What's positive is that I see, especially over the past 6 months, it seems to have come to the fore, is this view of anti-political correctness is becoming seen, at least stealthily, as avant-garde, as counterculture. And as he said, Donald Trump is riding that wave. People are sick of this. People are sick of having to moderate their opinions, to moderate their language. And it's resonating amongst, Americans to a fantastic degree, which is why you see Trump riding high in the polls. If you look into his actual background, then that becomes more shady, but that's a different issue. The other positive thing is, as of probably a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, public shaming via Twitter outrage mobs always worked. It always had the effect of destroying people's reputations, destroying their careers. But now, as in the case of the lawyer that I mentioned about half an hour ago, who complimented the woman for a stunning LinkedIn picture, God forbid you would want to compliment a woman. Helen Mirren says that a man putting his arm around his girlfriend is offensive and shouldn't happen. That received a huge backlash, and that's the point. And if you read John Ronson's book, who was featured in the Rise of the Cultural Libertarians, the same Breitbart article that you were featured in, I mean, he makes the point in the different examples that he cites. These Twitter mobs seem to have power on the surface, and if you apologize to them, if you relent, if you back down, if you show fealty, you will be destroyed. But as Milo Yiannopoulos has pointed out in his articles, if you don't apologize, if you don't back down, if you attack them back, then they tend to melt away. So this whole you know, the power of public shaming is losing its influence because people are starting to learn if they don't instantly apologize, if they don't instantly back down, then they will be successful. They won't get burned. So again, it goes to the point of they don't have as much power as they think they do. It's all perception, right?
Yeah. And I wish I had known that initially after the slut walk, because that was when I was first kind of introduced to the life-ruining aspect of being attacked by social justice warriors. I received, before my video had even gone out, I received hundreds, probably even 1,000 tweets just attacking me and coming up with stories and lying. And I just kept apologizing and apologizing and apologizing. And I didn't realize that eventually this movement would come up behind me and back me up and say, hey, no, what you're doing is wrong.
You were basically apologizing to a cult. And you thought you were overwhelmed by that, and you thought, this is the only way this is going to stop. But it's not true, is it?
Yeah, and after my video was released, after people started supporting me, created a counter petition, I realized that, hey, this group opposing these radicals is gaining power. They have the ability to bring the facts to the forefront instead of the hysteria. And that's what you're seeing. And if you go to the Breitbart article, Alum has put a poll here, or a chart of the popularity of cultural libertarians, people like Milo Yiannopoulos, myself, Christina Hoff Sommers, Kathy Young, Spike Magazine, and it's all going up in 2015. It's all going up because people are sick and tired. Even my left-wing liberal friends don't even want to be associated with those who call themselves progressives in their party, because they believe that liberalism, classical liberalism, has been co-opted by progressives for these insane purposes, these hysterical, fear-mongering purposes that want to silence others, and political correctness. And even everyone from both the left and the right are kind of uniting in cultural libertarianism and defending freedom of speech. And it's created for an amazing opportunity for libertarianism, those who appreciate individuality, and everyone to, journalists especially, to get more exposure for these ideas.
We're talking with Lauren Southern, InfoWarsMoneyBomb.com. It's the InfoWars Money Bomb 2015. Now, I also wanted to cover an image that you posted, or a couple of images that you posted on your Twitter account yesterday, I believe, or a couple of days ago. This was a flyer, I believe, that was put up in your college, which said that sexual violence, now consider those words with their full impact, sexual violence is now, quote, verbal, spiritual, and anything that, quote, disrespects the other person. This is what they're teaching students on campus. Tell us about that flyer.
Yeah, I wasn't even surprised to see it on my campus, because you've been seeing these pop up everywhere. Consent lessons. Lacey Green, the YouTuber, now has a kind of consent program that is being introduced to universities across the states that has a similar notion of consent being all these different crazy rules where you have to get a form signed, where it can be you lying to the person about what position you play on a sports team. It can be anything can constitute as not being consent now, according to all these laws. In California and New York, they've had the yes means yes and affirmative consent laws passed, where they've literally got these legislated on campuses that you have to have these flyers put over the campuses. You have to have these ridiculously rigid laws about consent, where you have to get forms signed, and even to the extent where you have to take a picture of yourself and the other person with this signed form so that you will not be accused of being a rapist on your campus. And the way
so they literally ask you to take a picture with your partner before you're about to have sex with them.
Oh, with the form that's been signed as well and dated. Yes. Very sexy, I know. It's a big turn on. Can you just sign this form for me there? And what's even crazier,
you posted the list of questions that have to be asked before two people engage in consensual sex. And it was completely ridiculous. It was, should I do this? Well. Is this acceptable? Again, this goes to the heart of radical feminism is completely destroying healthy relationships. I mentioned it earlier, you know, Helen Mirren. Don't put your arm around your girlfriend. That's offensive. That's like you possessing her. It's not showing love and affection. God forbid you would want to do that. It's completely misogynistic. So this is having the effect of making affection offensive and misogynistic, making men terrified to even approach women in the first place. So who are women going to end up with if they don't end up with genuine men who are interested in them? They're going to end up with, aggressive, quote, alpha males who don't give a damn about any of this conduct in the first place. So it's just going to backfire, right?
And those guys are going to have their lives ruined. This has completely destroyed any idea of romantic spontaneity, which women love. Every girl loves Noah from The Notebook, who never got consent to kiss Allie once in the movie. The scarier thing about this also is these laws. I've read through both the affirmative consent and yes means yes laws, and they can be misinterpreted very easily. It literally says in these legislations that you have to get consent for every single action you do. So if you hold their hand, you have to get consent for that, despite the fact that that would be an extremely awkward thing. Can I hold your hand? If you also decide to kiss them on the cheek after holding their hand, you have to get consent for that. It can literally be interpreted that if the guy doesn't get consent for every single action, even if they are in the heat of the moment, he can technically be accused of sexual assault, and that girl will have a legitimate claim. I wonder, do you have to get signed every time you kiss? In fact, there was a case, I'll have to look it up, where a gay couple, they would kiss each other on the forehead or on the lips every morning they woke up, and after they broke up, one of the guys went with one of these yes means yes consent law things and said that he effectively assaulted me because I was asleep and I could never get consent for this, and he is actually gaining headway in that case. This was according to a conversation I had, so I'll have to look at the direct facts. But even if that wasn't a 100% confirmed situation, that could be a reality based on these laws. And although these are laws only in New York and California, it is being discussed to be passed as a overall law in the United States.
No, I mean, they had a law introduced in New Jersey, which was based on this rape by fraud premise, which is if you lie to a girl, or, if a girl lies to a man before she sleeps with him about her age, her career, her income, her relatives, her previous relationships, anything, that could be considered rape. And they could be hit with similar charges to actual physical rape. And they even compared it to Megan's Law, which was based on a 7-year-old girl that got raped. And they had a website, Rape by Fraud, where they listed men who had lied to women before sex and compared them with this pedophile who had raped a 7-year-old girl and killed her. That was the level to which they took it. But isn't a lot of this about the fact that this doesn't affect radical feminists because they're mainly fat, ugly, and not attractive to men in the first place, so they don't have to have any worries in that field? Isn't that the case?
Well, it's the guys that take the risk to talk to them that have to be concerned. I would honestly be horrified to be a male on a campus trying to find a girlfriend, because God knows, you go and hold her hand, try to give her a kiss on the lips at the end of the night, you could have your life.
Not with mattress girls stalking around. I mean, that's the point. They're literally trying to portray all men on campus as would-be rapists based on this completely BS, bogus statistic of 1 in 5, some say 1 in 4, women on campus being, quote, raped. When if you actually drill down into the real statistics, women on campus are less likely to be raped than women in the general population. Yet they've launched this rhetoric on the basis of completely fraudulent statistics, as they do over and over again. Just in the last couple of minutes, Lauren Southern, tell us about your work with Rebel Media and tell us how people can see your videos on your own channel.
Yeah, for sure. You can go to therebel.media or go Google the Rebel Media's YouTube channel, and you'll find a few of my videos on there. And in fact, I will be coming out with a video either tomorrow or on Friday on the topic of cultural appropriation. So that will be a fun one. I also have my own channel. If you Google Lauren Southern on YouTube, it should be the first channel that comes up. I do a little bit of stuff on there. I also have written for Spiked magazine, and the Libertarian Republic. So if you want to check out more of my work on there, you can. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Lauren_Southern.
Okay, Lauren Southern, thanks for joining us. We'll be sure to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.